In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Concentrica, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. When we cleanse the body, we also cleanse the mind, making space for truth, balance, and vitality. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into the art of detoxifying body and mind, the wisdom of Ayurveda for modern living, and how true healing begins from within. Our guest today is Jonathan Glass, a naturopathic doctor, licensed master acupuncturist, Ayurvedic practitioner, and energy healer. He's the author of The Total Life Cleanse and co-founder of Healing Essence Center in Massachusetts. With more than 3 decades of experience blending ancient wisdom with modern science, Jonathan has guided thousands towards physical vitality, emotional clarity, and spiritual balance. His holistic approach, integrating Ayurveda, acupuncture, nutrition, and energy medicine, invites us to remember that wellness is not merely the absence of disease, but the full expression of life itself. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know. Mr. Jonathan Glass, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
So I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. And I was going over some of the note my team put together, and you have a very extensive experience in healing. So I think this conversation will be quite a pleasing one. But to kick us off, please tell us more about Healing Essence Center, please.
Sure. Yeah, we've been around for about 30 years now, and it's a beautiful little center in a nice town, Concord, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And we have 5 or 6 healers that work there. I'm the only full-time person, and we have a chiropractor, body worker, psychic medium, energy healer, nutrition, like that. And we've just been working with our community for many years. Yeah.
Very nice.
I also have been leading a lot of cleanse programs. I have a program called the Total Life Cleanse. And so I guide people for the last 25 years through a dietary, lifestyle, awareness, healing type of program.
Very nice. And you have a book on that as well, right?
Yes, I have a book too. Yep.
Very, very cool. So take me back to the very beginning of all of this. All right. How does one become so, I suppose, fascinated by health and by wellness, and tell me about sort of how that got into you in the first place.
You know, I think the way I think in terms of a timeline, and when I was very young, as an infant, I was in an oxygen tent twice because I had very serious asthma or allergies, and I couldn't breathe. My parents didn't know that I was allergic to dairy at the time.
Okay.
And so I was very athletic growing up, but I also had this lung condition. So every year I would be taking antibiotics, probably twice a year. And so that was sort of one trajectory. I was always looking for ways, or in time, after I grew up and I was in high school and college, I started really looking for other ways of improving my health. In the meantime, I used to go to this camp every summer, and a good friend of mine and I learned how to meditate together. It was a famous book back then. You may know it, Be Here Now.
Yes.
By Ram Dass. And we read that book all summer. We dedicated the whole summer to being present in the moment and meditating. And for me, I was in high school, so the best thing was that I was less anxious and I was a better athlete. Those 2 things were really important, and I just felt happier, you know. And so realizing that had an impact, when I was in college, I discovered changing my diet. And when I took dairy out of my diet, my whole life changed because my lungs started getting better. And then I realized, wow, okay, meditation is real, yoga is real, and dietary changes are real. And, I kind of ran with it. The other thing was that when I was 9, so all these things happened. When I was 9, I was playing baseball at camp. I threw my arm out playing baseball, and it was a lot of pain. I was actually kind of scared. It was so painful. I went to the infirmary, and the nurse in the infirmary, this is 1969, so it's kind of unusual. She did shiatsu, which is a type of Japanese acupressure massage. So she did it on my arm for about 5 minutes, and afterwards my arm was 100% fine. And I had no idea that that was even possible. It just blew me away. So I think all those things, and then people would tell me I could do massage. After that, I started doing it on people, just making it up, and people thought it was really good. So I just became very interested in it. And along with my own personal, challenges, I just became very interested.
Yeah, makes sense. So 69, let me ask you this first and foremost. Nowadays, wellness and this concept of spirituality and integrated lifestyle process, as it's called sometime, is very mainstream, as I like to call it. Was that the case in 1969? Tell me about sort of the progression of it from a societal perspective.
Right. So, we had back in the 69, we had the hippies who were really looking outside the box, but their medicine was mostly, LSD. That was that was the way that they got out of the box.
Sure.
But the society itself was very, people weren't open or interested in it very much. Even when I started thinking this is what I wanted to do, there was a part of me that was like, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? You'll never be able to make a living, because I didn't really know anybody. I maybe knew 1 or 2 people that were in the holistic field. But I have to say it was one of those times in my life where I just kind of knew it's the direction I wanted to go in. Like sometimes I think it's probably true for a lot of people that, they have these moments like, this is just what I want to do, or at least it was for me anyway. And I just trusted that, I could do this, I could make a living, and I could do it. Yeah. So now it's very, these things are very, very popular. But back then, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the sort of the alchemy of cleansing, as you call it, and your total life basically cleanse as not only a detox, but it's also sort of a pathway perhaps to personal transformations. And I think that's The Life of a Yogi is a book that always stick to me. Incredible book, and many great texts about this concept of again, something bigger than self, perhaps let's just put it this way, and the integration through physical, emotional, spiritual release, and again, which is much more accepted right now, but there's still some people perhaps that feel that are staying from it for various reasons. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, what do most people misunderstand about the purpose and power of cleansing?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. A lot of people think of cleansing as like a 3-day juice fast or a way to lose weight really quickly, or somehow get out all their toxins in a week, which isn't really possible to do in a week, but the way, I really come from a yogic Ayurvedic perspective, and Ayurveda is a system of medicine from India. And it's interesting because they say in Ayurveda that the cause of all disease is toxins. But what's beautiful about that model is that they include within it not just physical toxins, but mental, emotional, and even spiritual toxins. So toxins on every level. And that's really kind of how I view things, because I've always understood, I think, maybe since I got into yoga when I was about 16 years old, reading Autobiography of a Yogi and Be Here Now, I realized that, wow, everything is connected.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. And I also experienced that when you remove things that disturb the mind, disturb the body, then somehow or other, the way I talk about it is your essential nature, your essential self kind of shines through more effortlessly.
Mm.
So cleansing to me is not just cleansing the body, which that's important. That has its benefit, and it's important because taking stress off the body, takes stress off the nervous system, takes stress off the organs. And now we know that from the Chinese medicine Ayurvedic perspective, every organ holds different emotions, so it's all so connected. So my viewpoint is, reduce the amount of stressors that we're putting on the body. That will help the mind, and, work with the mind and the emotions, because that will also help the body.
Yeah.
And that will also help you sort of be more connected to, your essential nature, who you are as a person. So it's all very connected.
Absolutely. You mentioned spiritual toxins,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Physical, mental toxins. That's very simple to understand, at least to me. What are spiritual toxins?
Well, I put spiritual toxins in the two things. One is when, over dogmatism,
Okay.
being overly identified with your spiritual path as being the only right one, and everyone will, suffer either eternally or for a very long time, because of them not having the same beliefs or conceptions or things like that.
Got
So,
it.
and sometimes there can be, so it's not really spiritual, but it's sometimes somebody can become quite proud on a spiritual path, especially if they, with, practicing yoga or meditation or the disciplines that those sometimes involve, it can strengthen, our abilities in some ways. And in doing that, sometimes people can become more controlling of others. They can be more manipulative. They can use their so-called spiritual powers for, not such great things. So on that level, there can be some toxins involved also. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will probably butcher his name, but it's a gentleman called Gargi Vashaknavi, which is a very interesting philosopher from Western Europe,
Okay.
and he talks about the fact that before healing others, heal yourself. Right? Leo Tolstoy also mentioned this. Right? Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody thinks about changing itself. So when you think about this, the path to healing perhaps start internally, start inwards, or at least that's how I sort of understand it. From your perspective, with now everything at our fingertips, with technology, with what's the best way to get started, perhaps into the process of what it is, perhaps that cleansing and I suppose overall wellness in this three field of self basically are.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's a best way. I mean, I think the way I kind of think about things, I think that whether you want to call it, your higher self or the divine or the universe or God or whatever,
Yeah.
people have different conceptions of, or, there's a word in Ayurveda, buddhi, which means innate intelligence, the intelligence that kind of controls everything, just like the planets and the stars and the tides and everything. That same intelligence is in us. So I would say first, if somebody has a desire, it starts with desire, meaning healthy desire to want to know something about themselves and something about reality, something about how to improve their health, physically, mentally, emotionally. So it starts with that desire. So the first thing I would say is to honor that curiosity, honor that desire. Because a lot of times we think, even, in our culture, of course, it's changing a lot now, but there's sort of a dismissiveness of, or there can be, of an intuitive kind of wanting to know more. an intuitive wanting I need to heal something in myself. I know there's more to life than what I'm experiencing. I know there's more to me than what I'm experiencing.
Right.
So that is a real thing. In other words, I would say honor that with a lot of respect. Because what I've found is that when you honor that, then we tend to attract the right books, the right teachers, the right situations to come into your life. And then you have an ear for it. It's like, oh, even a conversation. You could be talking to somebody and if you're wanting to grow, you'll hear something from them and it'll be, my God, that's exactly what I needed to hear. But if you don't honor it, it might go right over your head. It was there. It was like handed to you on a platter, but you missed it, So we have to start with a desire. And that's very, very important.
I think it's amazing how once you have the desires and you're intentional towards it, life has a way to rewards it. Life found a way perhaps to give it to you, perhaps if you're clear enough in the outcomes you want to have, which I think is amazing and one of the best signs that there is a source, but that is that is up to me. From such perspective, Jonathan, really the reason why I was very excited to talk to you is that you have a way to bridge ancient wisdom with modern science that I think is highly underrated and is the future. That's, again, the way I see it. So perhaps you studied extensively Ayurveda, which I'm probably terribly mispronouncing, acupuncture, and naturopathy as well, which you have a doctorate degree in. But you also do that with modern diagnostic, right? Which I know that you're big into heart scan, for example, heart scan technology, nutrition response testing, and so on. So you have a way to bridge these two worlds, which I think is nothing short of amazing. From your perspective, how do you balance modern diagnostic tools with the intuitive practice, perhaps, of these ancient wisdom?
Right. Well, I love when modern science validates ancient wisdom.
Sure.
And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. So, for example, in Ayurveda, there's a general understanding of what causes disease and what's good for health in general, but then it becomes very individual. So there's a word dosha, which indicates our body type, or it also indicates the way in which an individual personally tends to go out of balance. So we want to identify that. And what's very interesting is that there are genetic tests now that confirm, from another angle, what an Ayurvedic assessment is looking at. The way I kind of look at, health is in the middle and it's like a wheel and there's spokes. There's many spokes. I've always had that image. And one spoke may be this lens and the other spoke might be another lens. And this lens may be another way of looking at what's going on.
Okay.
And modern science can oftentimes confirm things because we have, a very rational mind. Sometimes seeing something on paper can be very helpful for somebody's, mind. I know you told me that, but now I can accept it. It's just how we are. We've been conditioned to some degree to require these external ways of looking at things. And I think it's just always fascinating when science proves something, and for example, here's a little something. For years, Ayurveda reveres sesame seeds. They think so much of sesame seeds, and it says it has a lot of ojas and a lot of energy, and they're extremely nutritious. And they have something in there called IP6, which is beneficial for killing cancer. Okay. But there's not that much of it in there. So I was always kind of wondering, well, what is it about sesame seeds? And then there was this company called Life Extension Foundation, and they do all this research on nutrition. They found out that the skin on a sesame seed is called a lignin, has a very, very, very powerful antioxidant capacity on the fatty, the linings of our cell walls, on the the inner linings of our blood vessels, the linings of our cells, which are very important for those cells to be fluid and flexible so that nutrients can come in, toxins can come out, they can transfer nutrients really well. And so what they did is they put sesame lignans in all of their essential fatty acid products. And in their research, they found that up to 600%, it extends the antioxidant capacity of vitamin E and other essential fatty acid products, things like that. So it's kind of like, how did these guys thousands of years ago know that sesame seeds are good for longevity? Well, they did. And, science has proven it. So things like that happen all the time. I just think it's cool and interesting. But generally speaking, I don't wait for science to tell me that something is effective if it's actually effective, if I find it to be effective.
Interesting. So you value sort of personal experience over what is mainly known perhaps in the science research. Okay.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the of BKS Leanger. He said something along the lines of the spirituality and science is two wings of the same birds. You would agree with that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love science. I think it's great. I don't like it when it becomes a religion, when it becomes imbalanced, like makes sense, two wings. If one wing is working, is only respected and the other wing isn't.
Right.
I think in our culture, we need a real balance of it. And science is an ongoing, evolving thing. And of course, there's always new discoveries, and some of those new discoveries prove what was speculated in the past. And sometimes they prove something that was thought to be incorrect, so it's an evolving thing. And I have found, and especially, over the last few years, science almost became a religion for some people. And it really split the world too, right? It split the world in many ways because science is not meant to be a thing that we can just put blind faith in. It's it's no better than just putting blind faith in a religion that you really have no real connection to. It's like, what's the difference? It's still blind faith, and blind faith is not really, in my opinion, a healthy thing.
How do we balance those from a societal perspective? Let's talk about the Western culture. Obviously, we're in US, I'm in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I would totally agree with you on that balance of the respectfulness towards one wing, which is obviously science, and I would go as far as not only perhaps being shyer or perhaps being more questioning perhaps the other wing, but completely disrespecting the other wing, which is spirituality. How do we rebalance those from a societal perspective, Jonathan?
Well, I think the more people get in touch with their inner being more, and that comes through. My approach has always been from the ground up, meaning, okay, let's clean up what we're putting in the body because it affects our mind and our physiology, and you just feel better. So, and then then people tend to start opening up their minds to, wow, just like with myself, I changed my diet. Oh my God, I felt better. I meditated. Oh my God, I felt better. Like something, I accessed a part of myself that I didn't know existed. Part of the thing is that people don't know our potential. And there are tools and strategies and ways to tap into deeper parts of ourselves. I had a client the other day who was talking about something that happened in college, and he's almost 60. And as he was talking, I really prodded him because I could tell it was a big issue for him, and he kept minimizing it. And then all of a sudden, he burst out into tears, and he was weeping and weeping and weeping about this event. And he was like, I had no clue that I'd been holding this my whole life. And then he realized, actually, I knew I was holding it. I just didn't know it was important that I was holding it.
He didn't want to face it, yeah.
He didn't want to face it, and he didn't know it was even a thing that could be impacting his life.
Okay.
And that's part of the educational process, is when we do something, whether it's, changing our diet, changing our lifestyle, doing some inner emotional healing work, doing some spiritual work, and then when we realize we have a little bit of a taste or an experience of that thing, then we go, oh, that's real. That aspect of life has reality to it. So the more people that give it reality, then I think that has more of an impact on society, on the whole. Now, there is the, sort of the downside of commercial yoga, commercial this and that. In one sense, it's great because more and more people are exposed to it. In another sense, it's another opportunity to make something that's really profound, superficial. So there's always that, that opportunity. But in general, I think it's really good. And so many people come to me now that maybe wouldn't have come 10 years ago because,
Yeah.
I heard that acupuncture can do this. I heard that, so they hear these things on the news, they hear it in different places.
Absolutely. Well, from a free market perspective, the commercializations of these things are just natural because it's an offer and demand basically scheme. So as you say, as the demand increase, the offer also increase. Sometimes obviously losing sort of the moral component, which is a problem, and that we need to fight for without a doubt. Here's a completely new thought that I had as you were talking. I believe that Western civilization has never been this individualistic. I think that with the rise perhaps of technology, with the rise perhaps of this sort of performance first mindset from a societal perspective, I think we've never been basically confined more in the individualistic perspective. Would you agree with that, first and foremost?
That we haven't been?
No, we've been more and more perhaps submerged in an individualistic, basically society.
Yes.
So you would agree with that? That's interesting. But then, if that is the case, I would understand if there was separation with others because it is individualistic and it is perhaps glorified to do such thing. But I also see people never been this disconnected from themselves, which that's the interesting thing. You think, and I've just, like I said, this just come up to me as a sort of my intuition, I suppose. You would have think from a logical perspective that if we are more individualistic, then maybe we get perhaps further from others, but we will perhaps re-emerge into ourselves. But we don't see it either. I come across a lot of people, and they're not only disconnected from others, they're disconnected from themselves, and don't seem to be disconnected actually to their iPhone in their back pocket. So why do you think this paradox occur, perhaps, John?
Okay, I mean, that's an interesting question. And so I would say because there's different levels or parts of a human being, and I love the Ayurvedic model just because I resonate with it, and it has a lot of common sense to it. In Ayurveda, it says we have an Atma, or a self, right? A true self. And that self is eternal. It's eternal. It doesn't die. Can't be cut, can't be burned, can't be submerged underwater. It's that thing that shines through us that gives life. And then we have the body and the 5 elements. We have a mind. We have the intelligence. We have an ego, a sense of self.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that ego is very distorted and sometimes it's not, depends. So, for example, if someone is on an iPhone all the time, or just using that example as they're very self, but what part of themselves are they focusing on? If they're not focusing on their deeper self, if they're focusing on their mind or their desires, or their mind is just following whatever the phone is doing, or whatever. In other words, they're not connecting to their deeper essence. They're connecting to a more superficial part of themselves, which their ego is identifying with as being the real them. And in doing that, because it's not the real them, because the real us, part of our true essential nature is the capacity to be, the capacity to be aware, and the capacity to feel joy and to feel love. In Sanskrit, that's Satchit Ananda, beingness, knowingness, and love, or bliss, or lovingness. So if we're not moving in that direction of connecting to our deeper essence, then we're going to be interested in something more superficial, and therefore, based on the ego, well, on a more superficial version of the ego, and therefore, the ego doesn't like to connect unless there's something you can give me and I can give you, and when that business deal is over, see you later. It's a superficial thing. But when we go deeper, then we actually can see, even if that other person isn't aware of their deeper essence, somebody who is connected to their own deeper essence can actually see it in the other person, even if they don't see it. So that connects people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where love comes in. That's where compassion comes in. That's where acceptance of others comes in. Because we were able to look beyond the superficial in another person, even if they don't see it in themselves. So that creates a unification of human beings. And
yeah. No, from transactional to transformative. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the grass is greener when you water it. That's perhaps that's just that could be a great way to summarize it. You mentioned twice already in this interview, Jonathan, food or nutrition of some kind seem to be very central to the way that you perceive perhaps spiritual practices. And you talk about food as medicine, as ritual, as energy, as more than just fuel perhaps, but a conscious ally in our healing, which I think to be very honest, and let me know what you think of that, I think we sort of always knew it and sort of lost that knowledge for a little bit, or think we were superior to that knowledge for a little while, which I think happens with other piece of information also. For you, tell me more about that. From obviously you're very thoughtful towards that. Tell me more about how can food serve as all these great things, and perhaps is more than just fuel as we understand it from a pure caloric basically metric, but just a real ally in your healing, and should be a central focus of anyone's perhaps wellness.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two simple aspects to it. One is what is nourishing, and two is what is disturbing or toxifying. So the first thing is, so again, we'll go with the Ayurvedic perspective. In Ayurveda, everything is made up of three different qualities: ignorance, passion, and goodness, or lethargy, activity, and harmony. Okay. So even food can fall into those categories. So that means food that is old, tasteless, packaged, has toxins in it, food colorings, too much sugar, chemicals, all those things have frequency and vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has energy. Everything is made up of energy. I mean, that's what acupuncture is based on. That's what yoga is based on. And if we really think about it, that's how it is. So everything has a quality to it. So, and the idea is whatever we associate with, my mother used to, whoever your friends are, that's who you become,
Yeah.
So, so what we put in our bodies, not only is it, it has different vitamins and the fats and the proteins and the carbohydrates, it has the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, but it also has vibration to it. It has energy to it. So when we are eating foods that are out of harmony with the human body, then eventually it impacts the body, but then it eventually starts impacting the mind. And it can dull our emotions. I mean, when I started doing the cleanse, people started, coming down on their medications. They started coming down on their blood pressure medicine, on their cholesterol medicine, because those things started getting better just from eating cleaner.
Oh,
and
yeah.
even people many people wanted to come off of their antidepressant medications. I never recommend it because that's not my place to do that. But sometimes it's a conversation one-on-one with people because, I'm really feeling much better. So good. Talk to your doctor about coming down on your medication, you know? So food has quality to it. And I think, like you said, I think people kind of knew this, but we were kind of duped for many years into
Oh yeah.
thinking what I put in my body doesn't matter. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy. It's like saying, yeah, I think I'm just going to put the hose into my gas tank and just fill it up with water because it looks the same.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work. It doesn't work. So what we put in really matters. But the interesting thing is it affects us on many levels as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think your relationship with food is so profound. I think it's a relationship to itself also. I think it's very intertwined. There's a lot of traumas sometimes that are also associated with food.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people saying that I eat my emotion, for example, not only from an expression perspective, but from a first degree perhaps of understanding such terms. There's a there's a concept towards it which I'd like to dive deeper into with you. There's a lot of I love European writing, so I typically cite them. But Van den Kolk was talking about the fact that the body keeps the score, right? Your body does not lie. Perhaps if the way you're able to indulge yourself and the energy you have and so on, those are all very good indicators of your lifestyle and the life that you live. I'm interested when you think about sort of these stored trauma and how can we transform them perhaps in ways in which we can be enlightened by them. Perhaps how do you help perhaps those people with those stored emotions and traumas that manifest in their body, and perhaps how does your work is able to resolve them, or perhaps in many ways turn those into ways to better oneself instead of destroying oneself?
Yeah. Great question. And just to speak to the reality that, there's a lot of, there can be a lot of emotion around food. It's really true. Food is if you think of, there's different types of nourishment. There's food nourishment. I mean, it's a way that we feel, it is a love language, and so it can be a tricky subject. Sometimes people do the cleanse because we have limitations, what you don't eat and things like that. But, I really try to hold people's hands as they go through the process. But sometimes, yes, sometimes people need a little extra support to move through some emotional blockages. And there's a lot of different modalities. I use, first of all, I think it's interesting to know that the meridians in acupuncture, when everybody goes back, there's 14 major meridians, and each meridian is like an electrical pathway.
Okay.
And it's related to every organ. Like the liver has its own pathway. The heart has its own pathway. The gallbladder has its own pathway. And those pathways, science has found, go through the fascia. Mm-hmm. The fascia is like the skin on top of all, and it's one tissue, goes all the way up the body and all the way down. And that's where that energy travels through. And science has also found that fascia is where the emotion gets stuck. And so the emotion, you could say, gets stuck in the fascia along the energy lines of the meridians of the organs, of the organ channels. Like, for example, the liver channel goes up your leg, inside of your leg, up your body, up through here. So that means that these emotions that get stuck in the energy pathways then begin to, in time, have a physical impact on us. So acupuncture in and of itself can be beneficial for healing, because I call acupuncture nonverbal therapy. Someone can come in really irritable and angry. If I just treat that liver pathway, by the end of the session, they're like chilled out. That energy is moved. So that's one thing. But there's a lot of other really great modalities. I particularly I use some tapping. Maybe you've heard of emotional freedom technique. These are
No.
different. Uh, so there's an example would be emotional freedom technique is a technique where you bring up an issue and you make some statements about it, and then you think about it and you try to let yourself feel the issue while someone's tapping very specific points on the body.
Interesting.
You keep tapping, keep tapping, keep tapping until the point where the person's like, yeah, I don't feel much charge about it. It discharges the accumulated emotional trauma. And they found it to be very good for even Army vets or war vets, people that have had trauma being, killing people or seeing their brothers and sisters getting killed, very traumatic things. It can neutralize those traumas because the body stores it. And by tapping it and sometimes it becomes very emotional. They may be crying while you're tapping, or sometimes they even, express anger while tapping and just keep tapping, 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 and it helps to discharge it. So that's one modality that I really like. And then I also do something called alchemical hypnotherapy, which you go back in time and, I can't get too much into it. We don't really have time for that, but there's inner child rescue.
Oh yeah.
My teacher said it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Interesting.
So you go back and you rescue, little Sam when he's 3 years old or 5 years old, or little Jonathan, whatever. And you go through that situation in a healthy way. So if somebody's hurting you, you go in, you take that person away, the adult self or maybe someone else deals with the offender in the inner world. And it's crazy how powerful it is, because it's kind of like for the first time, we get to experience what it's like to have our power in that situation. And many times we make a decision about the reality of life, how life is in those traumatic moments. So then, like Ayurveda says, the cause of emotional imbalances are undigested experiences. Ayurveda is all about digestion. So how you digest food, how you digest information, how you digest experiences. So a trauma is still a trauma if it's not digested, if it hasn't been processed. Okay, it's hard to eat a trauma. It's hard to swallow it. So what do? We just have indigestion for 60 years on that issue. But if we look at it, if we move through it, and there's techniques to help us move through it, then it becomes, rather than a trauma, but like a very difficult experience that you've learned something from. It changes. It's like it changes where it stays in your body from one place to another. Before it didn't have the light of day. Now it has the light of day, light of awareness and acceptance and understanding. So now you've digested it, even if it was horrible. There's ways to digest those things.
You do a lot of pulse diagnostic as well, which is very interesting. Pulse reading, some perhaps is almost call it with everything that you're doing with Ayurveda and the 5 elements of acupuncture, which you touch a little bit upon. It really requires a profound presence, right? The live in the now, perhaps. And I have my whole theory about if time even exists, and the past, present, and future, and so on, and what emerged of all of that is something very interesting. But I'm interested from you specifically talking about the pulse reading elements and listening to the body. What have you learned from your decades of experience? If you could boil it down to a few digestible key insights, what would they be? Because I'm fascinated by that. People in which are able to listen to the body like a song, or like an harmonious perhaps display of self. It's always been amazing to me.
Yeah. The pulses are quite amazing. I mean, the left hand, that's your heart, that's your liver, that's your kidney, That's your lungs, that's your spleen, stomach, and that's your other kidney, or it's called three-heater. It's like your adrenals. So with each person, there's information. I mean, the body is always putting out information. And the pulses don't lie. They can't lie. You'd have to be a great mystic yogi in order to manipulate your pulses, So they reveal things. And that's what's beautiful, because someone might come in and I'll say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. Have you been a little tired lately? Yeah, actually I've been really tired, or are you feeling really irritable right now? Or have you been either drinking a lot of alcohol or eating a lot of sugar? How did you know? So there's so much information that you can get from the pulse. And the amazing thing also is that you do a little treatment, the pulse will change instantly. It's like a light switch. You turn the light switch on, you don't have to wait 10 minutes for it to turn on. It's energy. So it literally shifts really quickly. I will say that there are certain blocks that in the system of acupuncture that I practice, called classical 5-element, is the main system that I practice. And there's certain blocks that we are getting as human beings more than ever. And I would say since about 2016 is when I really started noticing a change. And then through the pandemic, it was even more so, and it's still quite prominent. And it's a block where people are literally, it's showing up that people are really disconnecting from themselves. It's like, maybe you've heard of yin and yang.
Yes.
Yin and yang is basically positive and negative, and it's what creates the energy in the body. The yin and yang, they have to interact with each other. But what happens is that the yin is going in one direction and the yang is going in another direction. So the person is not able to create energy. And when that happens, they feel wiped out, they feel depressed, they feel disconnected, they feel hopeless. They could sleep for 12 hours and still feel tired. And that's happening. I used to see 2 a month of that block, and now I'm seeing probably 6 a week.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's just the stress and the, when there's a lot of stress and people aren't willing, or don't know how, whatever it may be, to kind of take care of their own energy under those conditions, then sometimes it's like a fuse blows and they just almost can't deal with it. And so something blows, and then when it blows, they feel terrible. So they feel even worse. So it's a very, I'm appreciating acupuncture more now than I did 15 years ago because of what I'm seeing come into my door these days.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Truly, the way you display your thoughts and the way you perceive healing, from my understanding, is really a soul path. It's something that is much more perhaps than just a system management or a reaction perhaps to what how your body's feeling, and it's really sort of I suppose, an invitation to spiritual evolution in many sense.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested, there was this great quote of yours, which is, my mission is to guide people to heal on all level, body, mind, and soul. I use that very, very often, by the way. There's 3 levels of self, which is the body, physical, mental, and spiritual. So that's very interesting. I'm really interested from your perspective, what is the spiritual dimension of healing? And most importantly, how can we access it consciously? Because our subconscious is already, again, wired to the source, or whatever you want to call it, or at least I believe so. But how can we do that pretty much on demand, consciously, perhaps tapping into this dimension?
Yeah. Great question. So again, you can come at it from different angles. For some people, it's going to be more of a physical thing. Like, they clean up their diet, and they maybe start exercising. and they start breathing better, and they start feeling more connected to themselves. I mean, when I used to run a lot, after, a couple miles, I'd get into a zone, and it would be like a meditative place. It wasn't just exercising. And then other people will take to meditation, or they'll take to prayer, or they'll associate with others that are on a path that they resonate with. So I think it's just, first, okay, here's another way of looking at it. First, we have to, or we don't have to do anything, but we have the opportunity as human beings to direct our energy inward. There's actually a word for that in Ayurveda. It's called prana prana. There's 5 directions of energy: down, up, around here, out, and in. Okay? So we don't really, we sort of say go with them, and that word, some people say, well, what does that mean? But really, it's a real thing. We can literally direct our energy inward, and when we do, there's more there. There's like a whole universe as we go in. We can go through the mind, the intelligence. We can even see our ego. We can begin to witness what's inside. And if we keep going, in many cases, we can begin to make contact with our inner being, or our Atma, or in the West, we may call it the soul, or they call it the spirit. In the East, they call it the Atma, or the self of the self, the very essential self. So there are many processes and practices and ways to do that. Again, the first thing is to have the desire to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
To know that it's real, that it's a real thing. It's not just a cute new age idea. It's not just a concept that is available to some. It's available to all human beings. But most of the time, the way we live in the world, our senses are always outward. We're always thinking of, what do I have to do?
Oh, yeah.
Always perceiving from the outside. But our 5 senses are only just, it's the most outer knowledge acquiring aspect of ourself. The soul itself is said to have full knowledge already, but we have to direct our awareness inward in order to access that.
Is that what you think cause reawaken that vitality? One of the main things that I love about basically studying this topic is that there's real ways to reverse chronic patterns, and this concept that there's, because often they really mask misalignment, right? And therefore, when you realign yourself, you see that those chronic basically illness just, somehow go away, perhaps. You really have sort of an integrative systems that really helps with resilience, and again with realignment. I'm interested though, I suppose, is energy perhaps being able to figure out how to rewire your energy inwards one of the main ways to reawaken your vitality? And
Absolutely.
what are the core shifts perhaps that are needed to reverse those chronic patterns?
Yeah. Well, again, I think in order to do that, it's helpful to begin to do that which is more natural. To eat more naturally, to live more naturally. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're living in an age where it's very, very difficult, because most of us don't live out in nature. We don't get to walk barefoot all the time. We don't get to sit by the river and meditate for 3 hours, 4 hours a day. It's less common. Thousands of years ago, it was very common. That's what the yogis in India were doing thousands of years ago. They'd all go down to the river and meditate every day for sometimes 4 or 5 hours. That was part of the lifestyle.
Yes.
The water was pure. The air was clean. It's very different now. So it's more difficult, but to begin to appreciate those little things that we can do. Like every morning I go out to my backyard when the weather's warm, and I'll go out and just stand barefoot as soon as I wake up, sometimes before the sun rises. and just stand barefoot. If the grass is dry, I'll even lie down on the grass for a few minutes, just take in the negative ions from the earth. Negative ions are very healing and healthy. So, starting with some of those physical things, learning what works for your body to make your body more agile, more open, more free. This is where yoga is not the only way to do it, but that's what yoga is meant for, is to make the vessel more capable of taking in more wattage, more life energy. So if you have a 80-watt light bulb and, you're trying to take in 100 watts, it's too much. But if you can make the 80-watt light bulb open to the 100 watts, then there will be harmony. So again, doing these sort of physical practices with diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and then do the work, what needs to be done on an emotional level, but in the context of what is my purpose. My purpose is not just to get rid of all my emotional pain. From this perspective, my purpose is to reconnect to who I am as a person, who I am potentially, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, but also as a spiritual being, as an eternal spiritual being.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother thing, but it's a reality, and that's who we are. So by doing different practices on a regular basis and being aware that there are toxins that can interfere with that, whether it's physical toxins, mental toxins, emotional toxins. So those things have to be cleared to some degree. They don't have to be cleared 100%, because once we connect to our deeper essence, that has the power on the other side to shine through those things so that they're not obstacles anymore. I think there's a misconception that some people think I have to heal each and every iota of everything.
Oh, yeah.
To be whole. It's just, I just tell people, just clear the things that are obstructing your connecting with yourself, or obstructing, manifesting what it is you want in your life, and also manifesting a more real and connected connection with yourself.
I want to dive into your own healing journey before we wrap up with the future. So obviously you went from Heartwood to the Institute of India, and the Heartwood Institute to India, and you have a very, very extensive, obviously, career, over 30 years now, and in perhaps this amazing journey of healing, as what I perceive to be a vocation. I don't think it's really a job for you. I think it's just a vocation that somehow give you a paycheck. That's what Frederick Bushner was talking about. He said that your profession is what you were put on earth to do. Basically, that's what that term means. If you can be introspective a little bit, how has your own healing journey shaped the healer that you've become today?
Yeah, so I think I was probably, when I was in high school, like I said, I was very athletic, but I also was anxious in a certain kind of way. So I had a thing where I would like in hockey, I would choke. We call it choking, where I'd, go to shoot the puck and open net, and I'd miss the net, because I would freeze. And that's just an example of anxiety,
Sure.
And then, later when I went to India, then I went to Heartwood, where it was a healing school in the hills of Northern California. And I knew I needed some healing. I knew I needed to begin to look at some of those, issues and anxieties and patterns that I had. And that was an amazing place. I mean, I lived there for 6 months in the mountains, and we just did every day. We were doing body work, and, this was back in the day where, someone would be squeezing your toes or putting their elbow in your back, and, you're processing emotions that you've been holding in your body your whole life, So it was a real powerful opportunity to do some real releasing and healing, and looking at belief systems and structures that I had been holding on to unconsciously. So that was a big a big, huge phase. And I became very interested. I used to do a lot of massage therapy, and I used to, very often work with people and, find that spot because I had it done on me. Like there's a real tight spot on my upper back. What is that? What do you see? Well, oh my gosh, I'm seeing a picture of my mother. What is this about? So then you just go with it, and then pretty soon the person's maybe crying or yelling or just releasing stored emotions that are in the body. So that was a huge pivotal phase of life for me. And my parents were both very loving, but they really wanted me to be a certain way. And that's not who I was. And so I always tried, and I tried to fit into something. And in that, I think there was a lot of emotional suppression. I think I really didn't have I acted out as a teenager, but I never really expressed much anger towards my parents when I was growing up. I kind of held it all inside. And then at some point, I really had to let all that go, like all that stuff I had been holding. And it was very healthy. It was very healing for me.
Jonathan, we've been seeing the emergence of AI, technology, this sort of concept that now more and more the life of a human being will be an hybrid experience of himself and technology, perhaps himself, other humans, and technology. When you're thinking about what the future looks like for healing and the whole journey perhaps of the world, only as a business perhaps landscape, but as perhaps a personal journey that the people must undertake perhaps as a human beings, how do you see the progression? Where are we heading perhaps in your perspective, Jonathan?
Well, AI I think first of all, if we don't know that the soul exists, if we don't know that the spirit, that the non-material particle exists in us, then we're in trouble as a society. If we don't know that, so I think it's really, really important that all the healers out there and all the people who are on the fence start figuring this spiritual dimension out. Because if we do have that part figured out, if we do have a connection with it, then AI doesn't have to become a big problem. If we don't, if we still keep thinking that, wow, more mental powers, better memory, extended lifespan, so many things, if we are identifying with the so-called gifts of AI and not looking at the real gift of what it means to be human, then we're in trouble. But if we understand the gift of being human, AI it has no consciousness. It has no consciousness. And I don't believe anybody who's saying out there, well, one day it will become conscious. It can look like it's conscious.
Can mimic it very well, yes, but it will never be conscious.
Unbelievably well. And it will make people feel like it's being conscious, but it's not.
Correct.
It's not. So there is that conscious spark in every living being, and that's what we need to, I think, connect to. And then, just like fire can be used to burn down a house, or it can be used to cook a wonderful meal, AI theoretically could be used for healing. Yes, let's remove the energetic blocks. If it helps us identify emotional wounds, if it helps life in this world, be better in some ways, okay. I get a little nervous about it because there are people who are in charge who I don't necessarily trust.
Sure.
That's the issue. But AI in and of itself doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's neutral. It's neither good or bad.
Interesting.
Like most things. And I think it's inevitable, but I would say at this point in history, the potentiality of what AI could become, if anything, shouldn't inspire us to being fearful or excited about it, but rather should point us, okay, I got to get down to business here and find out who I really am so that I can deal with this thing.
Fascinating. I think it's your soul and a flesh carrying a mind. It's always keep that in mind. If AI can be one of the numerous tools and technology in which better human life, then fantastic. The world will be better for it. Jonathan Glass, thank you so much for being on a Meaningful Podcast. It was an absolute pleasure to have you share those very thoughtful moments with us, thoughtful insights. You look to me like a very genuine and authentic person. I think that's been reflected very well in this episodes. And I will love if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think just on jumping on the last couple thoughts, that profound question you asked about AI, I think, we're human beings. We have, in this Vedic scripture, it starts with the verse, now that you have attained this human form of life, indicating that we've been all kinds of things. We've been around for a long, long time. Now that we have this human form of life, talk about potentiality. There's so much potential having a human form that if we use this human form in the best way possible and get to find out who we really are, who we are in relationship not just to this world, who we are in relationship to the divine, and then begin to realize that and understand that, then our human life will be successful. And along the way, if we can remove some of the obstacles through diet, lifestyle, emotional clearing, mental, emotional healing, and by doing all that, we can actually become more self-realized, more the person that we have the potential to be. And the world will be a better place as well.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.